Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let's Play Pokemon Sapphire with yours truly, Mudkip Rocket Ship 3003. Happy New Year everyone! Feels kind of weird to say that since I'm recording this before 2016 rolls around, but no matter, I figured I'd upload on a special occasion. Hopefully everyone's New Year has been not too bad so far, and in case anyone was wondering, this is going to be a post-commentary for a couple of reasons. First of all, because when I recorded this, I could not get like a quiet enough space to work in. So, yeah. The other reason was because I thought it would be a good opportunity to try some new editing techniques to see, hey, I'll just like go ahead and skip forward. So I guess anytime I'll have a video that's mainly going to be grind and like trying to make sure I can get my level up, then I'll just do a post-commentary like this one. So, with that out of the way, first thing I want to talk about is one word in particular that I've really come to dislike very much over the, well, years actually. But I guess we should start off with its root word, cringe. Everyone knows this kind of feeling that you get whenever something painful or uncomfortable happens. You just sort of have that reaction that makes you think like, no, why is that happening? No, stop. But there's two kinds of cringes that I've seen. One is in response to a thing happening. So guys might know that whenever you see one of your fellow males take a very hard hit to the general groin area, most guys will cringe because they know, ooh, that's gotta hurt. Oh, I would hate to be him right now. And yeah, so these kinds of moments are just things that you just cringe at, and that's it. The only judgment of that you make is just, ooh, I would hate to be in that person's position right now. But there's another kind of cringe. There's a cringe at things people do. So for instance, if you see someone that has poorly matched clothing, or maybe they've made a little bit more of a scene than they probably should have when they're getting frustrated with someone, or what have you. But you all know these kinds of moments when you just kind of think to yourself, no, why are you doing that? You're making a fool of yourself. Just stop. But these kinds of moments when someone does something that might be uncomfortable for others to watch is known as cringeworthy. And this is a word that I've really come to dislike over the years, and I figured I might as well talk about it now since just the other day I had been looking back at some of my older videos, and I remember doing some things and saying some things, and just the whole like experience of the video just kind of like felt like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? And just so many things it made me cringe. And what I felt like was that the things that I did were cringeworthy, and I don't like to look back at my past. But like, I have one of these moments like anyone else where I try to justify what happened. I say, well, you know, it was just one of those things. I wasn't feeling that well that day, and I was already getting kind of frustrated from this or that or whatever. But you know, you justify, and it's not that like, oh, you're just making up excuses, but just things happen. And as much as we don't like to admit, humans are irrational beings, and sometimes when we've just had enough of frustrations, we just kind of lash out irrationally. There is no logic behind it. There is no actual reason behind it. We just kind of do. And I think that that's one of the things that people forget when they see someone else doing something cringeworthy. They just get to the part where they have the uncomfortable moment and the judgment, but they never actually get to the resolution, the actual, like, thinking of the justification of this. And I think I know why. I think it's because, well, part of it obviously is because obviously only you know yourself best, and it will be very difficult for other people to understand what you've been through. And so it really is another one of those situations like walking a mile in another person's shoes. And I think that that's obviously part of the reason is that since you don't actually know what's been going on, you don't really bother to think about it, because obviously the only way to truly know would be to go up and ask them or somebody else, and that would probably be another uncomfortable situation that people like to avoid. But I think the biggest thing that, like, is like just stopping people from being able to be understanding of each other, is that this culture that we have, it's sort of hedonistic, really. Well, not sort of, it is. And so people will try to avoid these uncomfortable moments, these painful parts of life at all costs. And I think that it's understandable, because again, like, people go through all sorts of different stuff and things hurt, and usually you try not to have that happen. But I think that when you just do less of thinking in general, that I've seen people do over the years, it leads to some pretty bad things, because obviously people want to just think, okay, well, the world is black and white, and either you did something wrong and you were justified, and you were not justified, or you did the right, or maybe you acted a little bit strangely but you were completely justified. What they don't understand, well, a lot of people, well, not that they don't understand, but we just forget, is that the world isn't black and white, and thinking about this stuff is hard, but honestly, that is the best way to go about it, is to think more, not less. Because, well, at least for my justification, I usually prefer to say, well, I think we should be good to each other for the sake of being good to each other. And usually I try not to bring any sort of religious connotation to it, because I understand that that's that's one of those things that a lot of people don't really like to talk about. So I try to leave that out, but I just say, hey, if there is something on the other side, it would be to our benefit to act on those kinds of moral grounds, to say, hey, let's be good to each other. Because obviously if there's no sort of consequences in the afterlife, then obviously it wouldn't have really mattered anyways whether we acted in good or bad. But if there is something on the other side, then obviously we're going to want to take care of that. But even if you don't want to look at it from that standpoint, it's just one of those things that would just be generally beneficial to the species as a whole. Because when we start to have more of these things, to start, when people do these kinds of quote-unquote cringe-worthy things, it's not so much that they were just kind of doing that just because, just why, or whatever. No, they've had things that led up to this moment in their lives. And maybe they're not always, consciously aware of it. And so they may never be able to figure out why they do the things that they do. And so when everyone is busy, having their painful moments and just doing whatever, and everyone starts to have misunderstandings because obviously they won't have the full context of the situation at hand, then if you start to have these misunderstandings and you don't address the fact that there is missing information, and you don't bother to take that into account when you supposedly judge someone, even though we should be avoiding that, it gets to the point where, I would personally say that it doesn't really matter too much what other people think, because obviously, you can think whatever you want, it's fine, it's your thing. But if it were just thinking, then that would make things so easy, but it's not. And, as much as we don't like to admit, again, people act based on, perceived, notions of other people, and that's basically the premise of prejudice, is that we don't realize that there's nuance to situations, and so we just kind of try to generalize. And so this kind of thinking is very dangerous, to just not even give someone credit and not even bother to try to think that there might be more context to the situation. It's dangerous because that is basically where all of the bad stuff and the hate and the evil starts in the world, is that you just have one person after another getting very much offended and not bothering to think about it from the other person's perspective. And so they act irrationally, and they don't even try to introduce rationale and reason into it. So then everyone starts getting even more hurt from each other's unfortunate decisions. And then it just gets to the point where it gets to people getting so frustrated that they want to start killing each other, and they just hate each other. And so that's really where it all leads to, is that when we have these understandings and we don't resolve them, it's definitely directly beneficial to our species as a whole, because if we want to survive, if we want to avoid our own extinction, probably one of the best things we should probably be looking at is that we're like basically killing each other just by the virtue of the fact that we didn't bother to think, well, maybe this person, like me, has had their own experiences in life that they're not proud of, and, things happen, and it wouldn't be fair. Like, if you think to yourself, like, oh, okay, well, I've done some things I'm not proud of in the past, and I probably wouldn't want anyone to find out about that, because then they wouldn't really be understanding. And if they did find out about this, then you might be thinking, oh, well, it's because this had been happening, and, like, I had been not feeling that well. But then you would be met with just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because that was the wrong thing to do, and so you suck. And you would really, really hate that. And so I think that most people would probably want to understand, like, okay, well, I don't want to have this kind of like harsh judgment put on me, because like, I have my justification, and like I know what happened to me. And so I think that's just it, that we need to understand that everyone has that. Everyone has one of those things where it's just like, well, I don't want to be judged for this. I understand that I did wrong, but I would hope that everyone would be able to forgive me or whatever. And so it just, I guess the point of me saying all this is that when you bother to like actually think about other people, then things work themselves out. As hard as it is to think about these dark things, these uglier sides of life, then things start to work themselves out. Because it is tough to like look at this stuff, because the negativity in this world, like all of like the hate, all of jealousy, and just just general bad stuff, it's not easy to look at, and we don't like to acknowledge it. But I think if we acknowledge it and we accept it and we understand that this is a part of life and that it's not something that we're just going to be getting rid of, I think that would be the first big step in, like, obviously it sounds kind of like cheesy or whatever, it sounds dumb, but like, world peace, man. Like, maybe it's not possible, but hey, maybe it is, and if it is, we might as well go for it. And I guess just in general, I guess we should try to be nicer to everyone. Oh man, didn't expect to get this deep with the whole discussion of cringeworthiness. I guess it was just one tangent after another. But yeah, so I guess in the end, what I would like everyone to like at least attempt to do is, the next time you have one of those moments where you feel like someone is doing something uncomfortably embarrassing or whatever, don't rush to judge them or whatever and think, oh, well, they're just being dumb, or oh, they're just a weird person in general that nobody wants to know. Just give them some credit, because who knows, maybe the person that was making a scene at the restaurant, maybe they had just found out that say for instance that their dad was gonna try to not give them like a portion of like whatever inheritance when he died or whatever, or maybe their significant other had just recently broken up with them, or all sorts of bad stuff. And so it really is like the last straw on the camel's back, where it just kind of gets to the point where it's just too much, and something as simple as a disagreement that probably wouldn't warrant yelling at ended up making them yell. So in the end, yeah, it really is just try to take into consideration the fact that everyone has bad things happen to them. And if you see someone, like I was gonna say, if you see someone kind of doing something uncomfortable, don't rush to judge them. Think, okay, well, they've probably had a rough day, or maybe they've just had experiences in their life that made them want to avoid this kind of stuff. So I guess where I want to leave off the commentary is just to say, everyone, let's try to be nicer to each other. See you guys next time. Take care, everyone.